Hey everyone, and happy Monday. Ask Mike returns. You've made your trip to Texas. How was it?
Good.
Good, yeah.
We moved my mom into a retirement home. She finally sold her house. She's 95. She's in a place called Raider Ranch in Lubbock. Not happy about the name, but it's a nice place.
And you celebrated a birthday as well.
Yeah, I had my birthday while I was down there, and she bought me some Nike shoes.
Oh, very nice.
Birthday, so it was good.
If you know Mike, you know he's a shoes guy. But he also loves answering, of course, your questions every week, which is why we are bringing this back. So let's get to it. Our first question goes to Super Hog, 1959. That person wants to know, what was Bobby Petrino like to be around? How did he treat his players? His recruiting seemed to decline after year 2. How do you think that would affect the Hogs in future years if he hadn't had the accident? Was there any sign of rumors on or off of field activities that the media just ignored?
Gee, that's a lot of questions. You may have to help me remember all that stuff. So I'll start with the first one. What was he like?
Yes.
You know, from a media standpoint, he was fine. I mean, we all thought he was going to be a big jerk when he got here. And instead, I think everybody liked him. We liked him because one of our pet peeves is sitting there at a press conference and it's late. And you're just sitting there, and there's some coaches that have been worse than others about that, but he was always exactly on time. It was like he had a radar in his head.
Hey, well, that's nice.
So you always knew what time to be there, and then you wouldn't waste time. He also was really good at answering questions. I thought maybe he'd be the kind of guy that if you ask a question he didn't like, he'd start giving you grief about it or acting like you were a dummy or whatever, because some coaches do that.
That's true.
But he didn't. He answered all the questions, and his answers were good. You know, when you go to a press conference, you want to come back with material. You don't want to come back with nonsense. SEC Media Days is coming up. A lot of that is nonsense. I'm telling you. And some of it is the fault of the people asking the questions. But Petrino gave you good answers, stuff you could go back and build stories with.
That's
so
good.
We all liked him. The problem wasn't with the media. It was with everybody else he came into contact with. Excuse me. First of all, in the Broyle Center, in those days, his office was on the second floor. You come in really on the ground level, but you go down a level. And he had this office which was right next to the football museum. So he's down there, and he's got this museum right next to his office, and there's all kinds of people down there. And then they bring their kids, and their kids would be running around, and someone would stick his head inside the door. And Petrino's got a secretary out there, Clorinda Carr, but then he's beyond that. But he hated all that noise. He didn't like people down on the coach's floor. And we were told later on there was kind of a rule that if you saw him in the hallway, you do not talk to him. He's busy, he doesn't want to talk to you, he doesn't want to deal with people. Don't even go down there if you can avoid it, because he liked being separated. And all of that led to the building and the plan that was in place, and really it was built this way, the Fred Smith Center, which is the new football operations center. It's fairly new. And if you look at how that's designed, it's like a bunker, at least where the players are concerned. So you come in first of all, it's all the way on the other side of the football field.
Yeah.
So if you're in the athletic department and you want to see him, it's a lot easier to call over there than to walk all the way down there.
Yeah.
And I think he did that on purpose. Then when you come in, there's a big lobby with trophies and stuff like that, but then to get past that, you got to go past people. And he didn't let you get past people. And the only time we were allowed anywhere in there, anywhere else, was we had press conferences down in the basement. And so on a press conference day, you could go down there, but you were still isolated. You just went down a long stairway and you weren't around any of the other players or whatever. Okay, when you get down to that lower level, that's where the locker room is. And it's nice. It's a really nice locker room, and they've upgraded it since. But I've been told that there's some indication this is a problem in recruiting, because when you start comparing Arkansas's football facilities to others around the conference, especially the newer ones that are being built, and Florida's getting ready to build a brand new one, most of their locker rooms are on a ground level or even up, and there's a lot of windows, and players like being able to look out. They don't like being down in the bunker, you know, nobody can see you or whatever.
I mean, I get that, but those are some nice locker rooms
they are, but I just have been told that that is an issue with some recruits.
Interesting.
That it's not designed for recruiting. It was designed to get his players away from everyone else and isolate them. So you had that. Now, what were the other questions? Was he hard on his players? Yeah, he was. But that's not unusual for a football coach. I mean, I talked to a lot of guys back then. DJ Williams, for instance, who helps us out on our game day coverage. You know, DJ played for Houston Nutt. He was known to be a player's coach. Petrino was a big adjustment, he said, but he said the players ended up respecting Petrino because they won. Now, he was crazy. I mean, they would have these meals down in the bottom part of what was then the indoor football workout area. They come set those tables up. And he had apparently like military academy rules. Like when you're eating, you couldn't talk to anybody and you had to have everything just for, yeah, it was real strict. A lot of discipline.
Okay.
But the players came to accept that because he won. So, you know, there was all of that. Now this business of what his off the field activities, you know, he ended up getting fired over that because he had an affair with a woman that he ended up hiring, an ex-volleyball player that he ended up hiring to handle his, kind of like the secretarial part of recruiting. And there were a lot of people that questioned when that was over. Gee, nobody know about this?
Yeah.
I can tell you that I didn't know about it. I didn't know anything about it. I heard about the accident on April the 1st of that year. I thought it was an April Fool's joke. And then you find out very quickly it's not a joke. And that spawned all these theories that this guy, this woman's boyfriend beat him up, which is nonsense. He didn't get beat up. He had all these scratches all over his face, which his motorcycle went off the road and hit a tree stump, and he slid along the side of it. And I went out there and examined it. There are all these little twigs and branches along there, and they hit him in the face, and it cut his face up. When you get beat up, you have these big black and blue marks, and he didn't have any of that, so he didn't get beat up. But he did get fired as a result of all that. I ended up being told by a person that knows him later that they were going to let him stay if he agreed to certain conditions. And he didn't. And he later told some people he thought he could bluff everybody because he'd gotten away with this stuff, and he knew that he'd been successful. He knew how important it was to win at Arkansas, and the fans loved it and all that stuff. He just didn't think they'd fire him over that. And I guess he got a big surprise.
Yeah, no kidding.
But, you know, did Jeff Long know about that? Some people say, well, he had to know. I sort of think he didn't, and I'll tell you why. It's that whole way that Petrino did everything. He isolated his staff, his players, and it was hard for a person in the media to learn anything about what he was doing other than what he said at a press conference. The press conferences were good, but when I started trying to talk to sources that I had used before with other coaches, they'd always tell me, I don't know anything about what's going on with Petrino. He's isolated. So I think it was probably entirely possible that he did all that stuff without anybody knowing about it.
Well, so, I mean, one of the parts that's kind of got me interested is if he hadn't been fired because of that, do you think he would have continued to be successful?
His recruiting, honestly, had dropped off some.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's any question that he would have gone downhill that next year. Would he have won 4 games, which is what happened under John L? No, I think he'd won 7 or 8. Now, the question is, would he have bounced back? And I don't know. I know somebody that recruited him when he was at Louisville. I'm not going to say who the person was, but I talked to that person, and he said he was being recruited by a bunch of schools. And he went on a visit to Louisville, and he said that was the worst visit. He said the guy's a terrible recruiter because he's kind of a jerk. He sort of had the attitude, well, if you want to play for me, okay, but if you don't, beat it. So,
I mean, like to a degree, I understand that mentality, but you got to kind of win him over a little bit.
I don't think he was ever a really good recruiter. I think he won with the talent he had, and that's probably his best quality. But I don't think he would have continued. He won a lot of those early games with guys that he recruited when he came in. At the time that he came in, there was some really, really talented in-state players, wide receivers, that he got, and I think it dropped off a little bit after that. So I think probably would have struggled a little bit after that. But would he have gotten fired? No. If he didn't do what he did, I think fans would have still been happy with him. He was winning.
Oh, yeah. All right. Next question from Boss Hog, who asks, why are specialists not counted in the recruiting rankings? The rankings show 15 recruits, but only 14 count towards the ranking. Obviously, our 5-star long snapper is not included.
You know, I asked somebody about that, and they said that the long snapper is included. What I was told is that these recruiting services like Rivals and 247, they do not rate specialists, long snappers, punters, kickers.
Right.
They just give them all an automatic 2-star status. And there are some other individuals, groups, or whatever that follow these specialists specifically, and yes, they will give them a 4-star, 5-star rating or whatever. The bottom line is this long snapper is really good, but it doesn't matter. He's going to be listed as a 2-star, and if you think that's unfair, I would just tell you they do that to everybody.
Right.
It wouldn't matter if it was Alabama or whoever. He'd still be listed as a 2-star. So I don't think it's a real issue. I don't get caught up in whether or not, well, geez, we were 13th and now we've dropped to 19th, and what are we going to do? They're having a good recruiting year. I think they'll end up somewhere in the top 20 or close to it, and that's real progress, and this is will be their 3rd recruiting class.
Yeah.
And I think they made progress every year, so I wouldn't worry about the 5-star long snapper being considered
not being counted.
He's counted as a 2-star.
Okay, there you go. All right, Blood Red Hog wants to know, what's the best win-loss record of any Arkansas head football coach in their 2nd full season? Of these 2 win-loss records, which is more likely this football season, 4-8 or 8-4?
You know, you got to go all the way back to 1909. Hugo Bezdek, in his 2nd year at Arkansas. Now, he's the wild band of Razorback Hogs guys.
Yeah.
You know, you see that whatever that is, the deal with the hogs and all the fountains and stuff on the northeast corner of the stadium. And here's the best 2nd-year record listed. Okay, 1909, he went 7-0.
Wow.
Won the unofficial championship of the South. That's what it was called. There was no overall national champion. They kind of had football in those days was split into 2 divisions. There was the better football, which was played in the North and Northeast and Upper Midwest, and in the South they were lagging behind. And Bezdek was a guy that had been brought in from the Northeast because of his coaching ability, and he had in his 2nd year that incredible season. And he made a big speech after they beat LSU, and he came back and it's, gee, what, a block from here, the train tracks?
Yeah.
There was a platform out there. It's not there anymore. But there was a platform out there, and he got off the train, and there were people out there, and he was making a speech about beating LSU, and he called his players a wild band of Razorback Hogs.
I love it.
The students loved it. It was reported in the newspaper. They were the Cardinals at that time.
Oh, that's right.
Not the Cardinal, but the Cardinals.
Yeah.
And the students liked that name a lot better, and it took 3 or 4 years, but they finally did a vote and changed the name. And boy, is that not...
I love that story.
I mean, he just, if he didn't do that, we'd still be here going, hey, the Arkansas Cardinals. It would just seem wimpy, right?
It just doesn't sound the same.
No,
it doesn't have the nice
terrible.
ring
so,
to it.
Kudos to Hugo Bezdek, the best 2nd-year record ever. Ken Hatfield is 2nd. In 1985, his team went 10-2. That's pretty good for a 2nd-year coach. And then Frank Broyles in 1959, he went 9-2. I think Hatfield's team finished 2nd in the Southwest Conference, and Broyles tied for 1st those years. But those are your 2nd-year head coaches' records. What do I predict for Pittman? Neither one of those.
I was about to say.
Not 8-4, not 4-8. I'd kind of go in the middle of that, maybe 6-6.
I think that's a pretty good.
Yeah.
You want them to make a bowl game, so that's what we're getting for.
Go to a bowl, 6-6, and then if you win, you're 7-6.
There you go. All right. Our next question comes from Rob's 4516, who says, the offense had a lot of 3-and-outs last season. How much of a difference do you think having so many players back, along with going through an actual spring practice, will help in that regard?
You know, it was not my impression last year that they had an unusual number of 3-and-outs, but I went back and looked it up. I think we got some graphics on that, too. But the deal was in the first year, in the first game, that was the one that stood out. I think there were 11 against Georgia.
Ooh.
And that's a lot of 3 and
Yeah.
outs. But if you look at it, that is probably where the lack of spring football probably hurt. Because you don't have spring football, and now you've got to get your offense ready with a new quarterback and all, you know, in the COVID year with all the problems, and you've got to face the best defense you're going to play against all year right off the bat.
Yep.
And I think it was a shock to them. Now, it's surprising to me that Arkansas was actually ahead in that game at halftime. But after that, it dropped in half to about 4 against Mississippi State, and then it went slowly down to, I think, had a couple of games where they just had 1. And then it went back up a little bit against Florida, and then went back down a little bit against Missouri, and then I think they only had 3 against Alabama. So to me, it wasn't unusual. This year, will they be better? I think they will, and here's why I think they will be better. I think they're going to run the ball more on first down. If you run it on first down and get, say, 5 yards, you've got more options. If you throw on second down and you throw an incomplete pass, it's still 3rd and 5, which is a lot easier than 3rd and 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So I think they'll run it more this year, and I think that will be a key to avoiding a whole lot of 3 and outs. Although, again, I don't think they had an unusual number last year.
No, I mean, and you just showed it. It's just going to go up and down. It's going to fluctuate depending on, you know, kind of the day. But LZH has our next question on Hogville and says, as we get closer to fall camp, conditioning is going to continue to be a big deal. What coach had the best conditioned teams, or what team stands out to you as being in the best shape that you've seen in a Razorback uniform? You know, it's not my impression that coach to coach, team to team, there's a whole lot of difference in conditioning. I mean, we don't have coaches that are so goofy they put their guys out on the field and they're out of shape. Yeah. The real issue to me is not how well conditioned each player is, it's how much depth do you have. Yep. Because I don't care how well conditioned you are, if you're in a position like D-line and you're blitzing almost every play, you got to have some help. You got to have some guys come off the bench to give you some rest. And that was the problem with this team last year. If you look at the defense, they started off last year like a house on fire. I mean, they were awesome in those first few years. They were. And then they just started slowly running down because they didn't have a lot of depth, and especially in the D-line. And that's what got them when they had that COVID issue where they played LSU, because they had to play a bunch of backup guys, and then they didn't have people to come, and they're still trying to blitz, and they don't have anybody to come in and help them, and they just really wore down in that game. So, again, I think what you need is depth, and that's what they've done in recruiting ever since the end of last year. They've been trying to add defensive linemen so they can get, because that's what they want to do. They want to pressure opposing quarterbacks, but they want to be able to rotate in and out D linemen, and I think they're going to be much better at that this year because they have more depth. All right, at Mousetown has our next one and wants to know, what's the excuse for the way ESPN botched the naming of the Golden Spikes winner? There was a big buildup, but when it came time for the announcement, it was like they shoved Kevin Kopps into the background. Yeah, that's what it looked like. I don't think it was intentional. No. It was really complicated. They had Baseball Tonight. ESPN had Baseball Tonight scheduled for an hour before the Yankees-Red Sox game. Yep. And it's a natural to put the Kopps thing in there. Now, nobody has explained this, but apparently there was never going to be a live announcement. What they did was they sent. So odd. Well, the people that were giving the award were somewhere else, and they had the award, but Kopps was brought in advance, and he was someplace over at the university where they had a setup, and he was told, okay, you're going to win this award, so we're going to talk to you, and then you're going to answer our questions. Well, apparently Hunter Yurachek, the AD, was there, and he got confused and thought they were doing it live because nobody explained that it wasn't live, that it was taped. So as soon as it was over, he tweets out or puts on the internet all this stuff that happened he said congrats in what the press conference was, and what a good job he did. So that gets out there. Now all these fans who've been waiting for the announcement go, well, why didn't they make the announcement? And ESPN, in the meantime, because they didn't have the baseball game, it got canceled because of COVID issues, they went back to the regular sports center that
that they would normally have. Well, Sports Center has a lot of different things in it besides baseball.
And of course.
Whereas Baseball Tonight would be baseball only.
Of course.
So when it turned back into Sports Center, they went in a lot of stuff like DeChambeau was mad because his driver wasn't any good and he was blaming.
And I get it. I mean,
you know,
it just.
And so fans are sitting there waiting for this announcement, and Bryson DeChambeau going, "Yeah, my driver's terrible,"
driver
and he's
sucks.
all mad. And so it's making them all mad. But you got to understand that the average ESPN viewer out there is not glued to the television to see the Golden Spikes Award winner because they probably don't care. It's a college thing.
Yeah.
And if you're in a college area where college baseball is big, it matters. But I don't think there was much drama to that. Did anybody really think that somebody else was going to win that award?
No. I mean,
so I think that plays into it too when it's kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah, he's going to win this. There's no big surprise. So I don't think they really conspired to kind of push him into the background. I think it just a lot of things happened to make it.
I agree with
that way.
It is basically though like the Heisman of college baseball, wouldn't you say?
It is.
I mean, it's got to be a little bit more of a production than
ESPN
just saying like
does college baseball.
Won.
That's their big thing. It's college baseball. So you maybe think, well, they'll make a bigger deal out of it, but I'm going to give them a pass because I think it would have been a bigger deal if they'd been doing Baseball Tonight. When they went back to Sports Center, they have a different audience, and those guys are always, they got the gears turning in their head, and they're trying to figure out their audience. Okay, the Golden Spikes is not big. We got to get into this other stuff. I
mean, they had to basically call an audible an hour or two beforehand and figure it out. So don't think it was like, oh man, we're gonna shove Arkansas at the bottom of the show like we always do or anything like that.
It sure did tick a lot of people off around here.
It did, yes, absolutely. T.L. Slayton on Facebook asks, how serious is the situation with Heston Kerstad? I heard he got medical problems and hasn't been able to work out or practice since he was drafted last year.
That is correct. He has not done anything in the terms of a team activity in the Orioles organization. Now, it was announced sometime last summer, I guess, that he had tested positive or had been diagnosed with myocarditis.
Yeah.
Now, that is a heart condition that is often associated with COVID. It can be caused by other things, but that's kind of in the news right now. So there's all this suspicion that, well, at some point, Heston Kerstad got COVID. But nobody's ever acknowledged that he did. The Orioles haven't acknowledged it. Nobody at the U of A has acknowledged it. And I can't sit here and say that's what happened. I don't know what happened. We just know that the Orioles officially said, yes, he has this condition, and he's going to sit out the rest of the year. That was last year.
Right.
Okay. Sometime around the first of the year, maybe February, they made an announcement that he was going to come back in time for spring training. And then right before that happened, he didn't show up. And I guess they came back and explained that he had had a relapse or a setback or whatever. What they keep saying is they're going to be extremely careful because this is a serious situation and they don't want to cause any problems with him. So they're going to err on the side of caution. The last thing that was put out by the Orioles was about a month ago, and their GM said that it looks like he will sit out the rest of the year.
You just hate that for him.
You do. He was their number 2. He was the number 2 overall pick. I mean, come on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope it's not. I hope that's what's going on. That they're just being really overly cautious. But it is concerning that he did have this kind of a relapse, or at least what happened is the problem that he had kind of came back. He'd been resting and he didn't have it, and then it came back. And so let's hope if he sits out a second year, then they've been very cautious and he'll be fine.
Yeah, let's
hope.
But
we will update you if we get any new information on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Arkansas Redneck has our next one and says, I see where the kid from Oral Roberts went to Texas Tech. How much will that impact the basketball team this coming season?
Well, look, he was a great player. He is a great player. I mean,
it's unfortunate.
He averaged 19 points a game last year. He averaged 9 rebounds a game. He's a 6'8", 225-pound guy that can score inside, rebound, but he shoots the three for like 42% from three. That is unbelievable.
He had like 15 double-doubles last season.
So yes, even as stacked as they are right now with talent, he would have made them a better team. It might have that might have been the difference in a national championship. I don't know.
Let's hope.
But they didn't get him. And it's not the end of the world. They've got a couple of guys. Amude is a transfer from South Dakota, I think. He's very similar. He's not as big. He's around 6'6", but he's one of those small forward, big guard types. He can score inside. He can shoot the three. He actually averaged almost 22 points a game.
Oh, wow.
And around 8 boards a game. So he's pretty good. And then they've got another guy, I'm trying to remember his name, but they got another 6'6" big guard, small forward that averaged around 15 points. I think Audis, how do you say his name? Audis Tony?
Audis Tony, yeah.
Yeah. And he's, his numbers were about 14, 15 points a game. I think he transferred from Pitt, and he's got averaging around 8 or 9 boards a game. So you put those two guys in there, and you may not have the big 6'8" guy, but you've got 6'6" guys that are pretty physical and jump, and they both can shoot, so they can score. And then you've got the kid that transferred from UALR and sat out all last year, Kamani Johnson. He's not as much of a scorer, but he is an inside physical guy, and he can rebound. So they got all of those guys in the form of transfers. Plus they've got the guard, the little Muggsy Bogues type guard. He's a little taller than Bogues, but he's I think about 5'7", and he's real shifty, and he can get in there and find a little crease and then dish it off or score himself. So you put all of those new guys in with the people they have coming back.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a real sense of optimism with this basketball team. So I think they'll be fine.
There's a ton of talent. It honestly might be one of those things where he has to.
I think it's a top 5 class right now.
Well, it's like, who's your starting 5?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. It's going to be interesting to see
There's only one
who he puts
basketball
out.
in a game, so
exactly.
you got to share it. So.
All right, Eddie Lynn has our next one for you, Mike, and says, "Did you see where Vanderbilt's football player have no numbers? Is that some sort of politically correct nonsense that this school is known for? How can they play without numbers?"
Well, they're not going to play without numbers. Here's what happened. Last spring, when and I don't know how much media shows up for Vanderbilt's spring football game, but when they showed up, there were all these guys running around out there, and they didn't have any numbers on. And the media was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, they've got a new head coach, and he explained that he didn't like the effort some of these guys were. He felt like they were too entitled. And this is not a new concept. I've heard of it before. What they do is they take your numbers away from you. Now, sometimes they just do it with a player. I'm taking your number away, and you got to do something to get it back. That's pretty common. In this case, he took it away from everybody, and I guess they actually were running around without numbers on their jerseys. You can do that in a spring football game. I promise you,
they'll have numbers for the
season. You can't do that in a regular season
That
game.
would not work.
So motivation or not, they're going to have numbers on those jerseys. Whether or not this will work, I don't know. We'll see.
Wasn't it Chad Morris that did something like that too?
Somebody did.
I think
you got to earn these numbers back.
Yeah, he gave everyone like just straight T-shirts.
Yeah,
and
he did do that.
Yeah.
I remember. It's kind of. To me, it's kind of cheesy. I think it's like a cheap motivating thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, if it works,
first of all, the players that dumb. They go, I don't have my number. Can I ever get it back? Am I going to have to play with no number on there? They know. They know that he's got to give them their number sooner or later.
Eventually, yeah. All right, we've got one more question in this week's edition of Ask Mike. Armand Abbey says, "I can't stand the Longhorns, and now they've given me another reason to hate them. I guess it's going to be a penalty this season if opposing players flash the upside-down hook 'em horn sign in a game. What a bunch of crybabies." Well, I agree, actually.
This actually came out of the Big 12 media days last week, and I guess they had the Big 12 supervisor of officials up, and I don't know how this came up, but he said that apparently it's going to be a penalty in Big 12 games this fall if you as a player flash the upside down hook 'em horn sign to another player. And he went out of his way to say if you turn around and do it to the stands, I guess even if you do it to Texas fans, it's not a penalty, but it's considered insulting to one player to another and could end up causing a fight. So they're going to say it's a penalty. Now, here's the thing. Nobody explains this, but they're not just going to come up with a rule like that. You know,
Right.
somebody at Texas had to complain.
It just
And this is where it
doesn't
makes
make
them look
sense.
like a bunch of weenies.
Yeah.
I mean, don't just deal with it. You know, it's
Well,
not
I mean,
the worst thing in the world.
People do it all the time. All the time. And people are going to be doing it a
And
whole lot
it's
more
going to
now
the
because of that.
fans are going to go crazy with it.
Yeah.
Now, again, the players will probably be told, if you're playing them, don't do it, don't get a penalty. Now, here's the interesting part. Okay, so what happens if it's a non-conference game? And I haven't looked at Texas' schedule, but they got games in DKR Stadium in Austin.
They're playing here?
They're coming here, but let's talk about the games there.
Okay.
It's a non-conference game. You go there. Do you have to go there and agree to this silly rule?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I don't know. But I do know that when they come here, it's probably not going to be a rule.
There's going to be a ton
But
of
it's
those
not,
words down.
it doesn't matter because Sam Pittman doesn't go in for that kind of stuff anyway. I'm sure
Right.
he'll pretty much tell his players, look, don't be doing that.
Yeah, knock it off.
It may not be a rule, but I just don't want you doing that.
And I understand that.
I don't think it'll be an issue when they come here with the players. I think the fans will be doing it out the wazoo.
Yes. I imagine some signs and stuff.
They will
as
get
well.
off the bus with people doing that. You know, it's just made it worse.
They did, exactly. They brought more attention
I'm sitting there
to
thinking,
it.
if I'm one of those players, by the time this season's over, they're going to be sitting there going, who did this? Can we change this?
Can we take it
Cut
back?
it out.
All right, I like that. That was a good one to end this one on. But that's going to wrap it up for Ask Mike this week. We'll be back next week, of course, as always. But for Mike Irwin, I'm Tara Talmadge, everyone. Thanks for watching and have a great Monday.